Hello, I'm Sam Fiorello, President and CEO of the Cortex Innovation Community. It's an honor to welcome you to the launch of the Global Center for Cybersecurity at Cortex and the NetMeasure Conference. Since 2002, the Cortex Innovation Community has welcomed technology-focused companies from startups to large corporations, and we've used our tremendous convening power to create robust networks that bring together best business practices, academic discovery, and entrepreneurial support to create an environment where people succeed, innovations flourish, and companies thrive. Our global award-winning organization offers those who take advantage of our innovation community a curated suite of programmed activities, a diverse offering of real estate resources, and vibrant partnering opportunities. Cortex is dedicated to growing companies and talent and being a place where all who come may succeed. The following video will give you a glimpse of why Cortex is well positioned to serve as the home of the Global Center for Cybersecurity. Again, we're thrilled to be part of the Global Center for Cybersecurity. Now, I'd like to welcome Josh Jaffe, President of the Global Center Board.
Thanks so much, Sam. Really glad to be here with you and glad to be here with all of you. Hello and welcome. My name is Josh Jaffe. I'm the President of the Global Center for Cybersecurity, and welcome to our first NetMeasure conference. More on that and what that means a little bit later in the program, but first, a few words about us at the Global Center for Cybersecurity. We're an organization created by security leaders for security leaders. We grew out of the Heartland community in the United States and have now grown to include members from across the United States and around the world. We have an audacious vision. We like to talk about a world that's both more equal and more secure. And I know that sounds grandiose, but over the decades, if you think about how cybersecurity has changed from being an afterthought to something now that is central to the way that we as organizations think about our strategy, as academics think about the programs that we offer for students, as even just consumers of information think about all the challenges that we encounter because of cyber and the different demands of technology on our lives. Really critically important, I think, for all of us to recognize that it's important for us as organizations and as leaders to be able to recognize the need to put the problem of cybercrime on a different trajectory. We think the trajectory that we're on now isn't sustainable. We think we can change that. And we like to call this global approach, Globe is Enterprise. The notion that all of us as cybersecurity leaders working together have the ability to, as we like to say, pull on the same side of the rope, trying to change the way that the industry functions, the way that we respond to cyber threats, and ultimately do that in a way which pulls the arc of cybercrime downward, but also by creating opportunities to grow and develop the cyber workforce in a way that really creates opportunities that are unique for people, opportunities for job creation and training that will change lives, but also the trajectory of families for generations to come, aimed in a way that helps us as enterprises create teams that look more like the communities around us. We do this a couple different ways, but the main way we do this is by listening to our members and partnering first. We have a diverse cadre of members and partners that come from around the world and broad communities. Some of them come from the tech community, some come from specific industry verticals, some come from governments, others come from not-for-profit communities. All of them share our mission. And we organize what we offer and what we do around three core pillars. The first is focused on collaboration, on learning from each other, learning best practices, making the most of opportunities to copy and reuse things that are already working in the industry. As we said before, pulling on that same side of the rope together. The next, and really the central pillar for us, is around workforce development. We see it critical for us to be able, as I said before, to take advantage of the opportunity in our own communities and the areas where we live and work, to be able to find and recruit much more diverse talent that represents the communities where we live in and where we work on a day-to-day basis, but to not just focus on entry-level opportunities, but also take the time to grow and be deliberate about growing the opportunities for people to become leaders in the cybersecurity industry. So we have not just a diverse talent and diverse workforce, but we have a diverse cadre of leaders across the cybersecurity industry as well. And finally, we focus on innovation. That's innovation that allows security leaders to have access to leading edge and emerging technologies, but also access to the innovators who are creating and dreaming up those technologies. Also includes finding the right ways to allow universities to partner with researchers and with innovators who are engaged in the industry and doing dynamic work right now. But it also focuses on democratizing the access to capital so that the innovators who are creating those ideas and those technologies are as diverse as the workforce you were just speaking about. And finally, a few words about our members. Our members and partners come from large and small entities around the world. That globe as enterprise approach includes, like I mentioned, academia, not-for-profits, researchers. It includes large and small enterprises as well. And that's important because we're member-led and we're member-funded. We depend on and rely on the partnership from members and partners to be able to offer the kind of content, but also the kinds of services that we talked briefly about and you'll learn more about here today. So with all that being said, though, we have a great agenda and let's get right to it. If you like what you're hearing today or you like what you've heard already, please take an opportunity to visit our website, engage with some of our partners. You'll see opportunities to engage with them on this platform and in our partner lounge. Join a conversation with some of your peers, schedule a call with one of our board members, and ultimately, if you like what you're hearing, take the opportunity to join with us and be part of what we're creating. Anyway, that's enough for me. We have a really great lineup and I'm excited for all of you for us to get right to it. I'd like to take just a second here and hand it over to our next panel. It's going to be moderated by Erica Wilson. Erica is the CISO of CAS Information Systems and really a great proponent of diversity in cyber education throughout her career. Erica, over to you.
Thank you, Josh. I'm so excited to dive into this topic today with Lamont, Michelle, and Luis, and they're going to share some insights. Before we jump in, though, I want them to each give a quick intro of their background and their current role. Let's start with you, Lamont.
Thanks, Erica. Good morning. My name is Lamont Orange, and I'm the Global Chief Information Security Officer for Netscope. I've been in cybersecurity for 25 plus years. I've served as CISOs for security product companies, for corporations, as well as in the consulting roles.
Next, let's hear from you, Michelle.
Thank you, Erica. I'm Michelle Valdez. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer at OneMain Financial. I've been in cybersecurity for more than 16 years now. I have spent my last 2 roles in the financial sector, and prior to that, I spent a lot of time working with the government and the Department of Defense. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Luis?
Hey, Luis Arzu. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for Urban One. We're a media company based out of Silver Spring, Maryland. Before this, I was the Chief Information Security Officer for Farm Credit Financial Partners, and collectively have roughly over 20 years in technology, with the last 10 years being focused on cybersecurity. Glad to be here today as well.
Awesome. Thank you all. Great backgrounds you all have. Merriam-Webster defines diversity as the condition of having or being composed of differing elements or a variety. Today, we will uncover the opportunities we face in our industry, and specifically how the cybersecurity industry can benefit from ensuring teams are composed of the best and the brightest cyber professionals from all walks of life. Let's start with the first question that I like to pose today. Having diverse representation in the workplace is powerful. It has proven to lead to innovative thinking and acceptance of various work styles. It is said to create better performing teams and leads many companies to growth on a global scale. So my first question is, with this in mind, why is having a diverse cybersecurity workforce critical to the success of a company? Let's start with Lamont.
So I think that the criticality of having diverse teams really helps the organization spark creativity, spark innovation of products, services. It helps you reach different demographics, which increases your market share. And you can understand how your products and services may fit into places that you didn't think that were naturally an adaptation for those products. The other thing it does is create a culture of inclusion. Everyone wants to buy and consume services within the organization that stands for what they stand for, and that has individuals that either think like they do, look like they do, and have common beliefs. So that period or that spirit of inclusion is very important when you're looking at what services you want to invest your time, energy for promotion, as well as consumption within the broader company.
Michelle?
I think it's very important to make sure that you have people who come from all different backgrounds and experiences. Every single one of those backgrounds will bring value to your team. And I think that particularly in the cybersecurity realm, having diverse thought and varied experiences is critical because our environment is ever changing and ever evolving. And we should be able to do the same. And I think that takes a diverse group of individuals who can come at a problem or come towards a solution from a different perspective.
Luis, what do you think?
I agree. I think that there's a mutual benefit here, not only for organizations to help them drive revenue and increase in the value that they're providing to end customers, but there also is an opportunity for growth personally for each and every individual that partakes in that diverse group. I think that having diversity in the workforce certainly breeds an opportunity for conflict, but through that conflict, innovation is bred as well.
Great insight. Let's move on to the next question. Cybersecurity Ventures predicts that there will be 3.5 million unfilled cybersecurity jobs globally this year, and that's up from 1 million positions in 2014. For years, we have heard that the shortage of talent in the cybersecurity industry remains at an all-time high. What factors should an organization consider for expanding options with a growing diverse candidate pool of cyber talent? Michelle, let's start with you.
It's a great question and something that I think a lot of teams grapple with. I think that there is this unseen or invisible barrier that people feel is there to getting into cybersecurity, thinking that people have to come from a technical background. I myself did not come from a technical background, and I'm fortunate to be in the role that I am because I had leaders that believed in my ability and the things that I brought to bear. So looking for skills like people who take initiative, people who can communicate, people who can problem solve. You can find these skill sets in a variety of different previous fields, like whether it's the military or it's different roles within a company. And that brings value to the cybersecurity team because not only are you bringing a skill set that often is not found readily within the cybersecurity team, these are often skills that are not easy to be taught. I always say I can teach cybersecurity to anybody, because if I was able to learn it, I think anybody can. But what I can't teach is the ability to have critical thinking, the ability to communicate, particularly with our business leaders, the ability to solve risks and solve problems, and just to take initiative. That is so important. And you can find that in any field. It doesn't have to come from a technology or a cybersecurity background.
That's great. Lamont.
So I think you have to understand what is the culture that you're trying to promote within the organization that would show diversity and inclusion. I think you also have to, when you're looking at growing your program, it's also something that you should be able to highlight because, again, your prospective joiners to the organization are going to want to know what you're doing versus what you say you're doing. So you always have to have some proof there. So when you're looking to diversify the organization, I think it's important to have the cultural change that you want to institute as the goal and have it very visible and showing how that you live this every day. And you can demonstrate that to your prospective joiners as well as those that are in the company. And then the other thing, when you're looking at diversifying your teams, you also have to understand how to get top of funnel activity. So you have to generate diverse candidacy in order to hire diverse people into the organization. So you have to have strategies that will indicate how do you reach the diverse communities.
Luis.
I could not agree more. One example for me is I employed a young lady who came from a communications background back when I was working at Farm Credit. And I can't tell you the difference in perception that she made based on her ability to communicate effectively with the leadership and or her peers on the team, particularly because she came from that different school of thought. She thought it important to make sure that things were characterized the way that they needed to be. And in short, her technical training came through really kind of on the job and her being sent out to opportunities to learn and grow. Because I fully agree, like Michelle said, that we can teach cyber. It's those other kind of intangible skills that we cannot teach and that we need in this field.
I agree 100%. There's so much in cyber that correlates to so many other skills. And that's really some great insight for our audience today. So let's switch specifically to talk about gender diversity. According to Minorities in Cybersecurity, which is a nonprofit corporation dedicated to leadership and career development, women make up about 50% of the global population. However, representation in the cybersecurity field is roughly 11%. So this is a two-part question. Why do you think this is the case? And why should women consider a career in cybersecurity? Luis, let's start with you.
Sure. We'll take the first part of the question as to why this may be the case in terms of the shortage of women in the cybersecurity field. And I'll keep it simple in saying that sometimes we tend to identify with folks that we see doing other jobs. So by and large, there hasn't been a large representation of women within the cybersecurity field. So other women may feel, well, that's not an opportunity for myself. But it's about time that we start breaking those stereotypes. And I think that with more women entering the cybersecurity field, we would provide opportunity for other women to also see that they can also partake in this very, very lucrative field. I think it's beneficial to women in that they'll see their pays increase as well. They're going to be challenged personally to grow. They're going to be also put in with other individuals of other diverse backgrounds that will allow for them to culturally grow within their career as well. And by and large, I think that they'll see the same opportunities afforded men in this field. But I think that the critical thing is that the breakdown of that stereotype. I think that more women will certainly call other women to come in and join in the cybersecurity workforce.
I love that. And Michelle, with you being a woman in this industry, you have to add to that.
Yeah, I will say that it's been a journey as a woman in cybersecurity. What it makes me most happy is that while the first 10 years I was often the only woman in the room, That is starting to change, but I think we have a long way to go. And I think it really starts all the way back at school age. Having organizations, nonprofit organizations and schools that are really focusing on making sure that young girls are learning and getting exposed to and being encouraged to do things in science and mathematics and computers is so critical, because the leaky pipeline is real. When you look at kids from grade school to middle school to high school, you lose a lot of girls along the way. They feel discouraged. They don't feel that they can be as competitive as the boys in the classroom. Then you get into college age, and while you're seeing a lot of young women coming into the workforce in cybersecurity, they often leave the first few years of their career. Again, I think a lot of that has to do with having other women to be related to be working with, to be mentored by, and even more importantly, to have somebody as their advocate. And having women leaders be the advocate for up and coming rising stars, young women in this career field, is so critical. It's critical for male allies to do the same, but I think it's going to be even more important that as we see more and more women filling senior roles in cybersecurity, that we all take the responsibility to be advocates for those who will come after us.
I couldn't agree more. I too am an advocate and promote STEM education and awareness outside of my work, because it's really important to see more of us in this industry. Lamont, what are your thoughts about this?
So I think that there's less exposure to women to cybersecurity careers. I think we've not done a good job with awareness. Cybersecurity, you hear about it. There's lots of opportunity. It's so big, but we haven't necessarily done a very good job of promoting awareness to the different diverse groups and of people. And what I think the other thing that's a catalyst to this is we tend to treat everything as an initiative versus having a continuous exposure that's sustainable. And we continue to expose everyone to these cybersecurity careers. There are lots of organizations that look at this as an initiative and grabbing, the initiative of the day, say individuals that are trying to expose everybody to code, but it's an exposure for a day, it's an exposure for a month, instead of building a sustainable program for this continuous exposure and how this translates into careers, how this can help change your social and economical status, and just how it can continue the cycle of improvement and betterment of some of the services and products that we consume. And I think for the other side of the question is, why should women consider cyber? I think it's an opportunity to leverage innovation and creativity of a fast-paced occupation that you can get no other place. It's a disruption of and transformation of the current norms that breed limitless opportunities. And that may say, oh, that's somewhat of a big response. Well, cybersecurity is a big field. And I think when you bring in a different perspective of thinking, a different perspective of execution, and a different view, you get a new way of looking and a new way of solving problems that we deal with every day. And I think those are limitless opportunities. There's always a need in society, in communities, in the world. We just haven't had the right view of how to approach and solve it. And I think that's why women should consider this field. You bring a different view and a different perspective.
Our next question focuses on components that are very important for having a high-performing team. So education, engagement, collaboration, all of those things are important, and it seems to be widely understood. However, many companies still experience issues with retaining talent in the cybersecurity industry. In your experience, what is it that you do to keep top cyber talent engaged and wanting to stay with your organization? Lamont.
That is a great question. Retention seems to be as charted as a problem, as much of a big problem as it is finding skills. So I think what we have to do is go back to the basics. We have to show our team members that they are appreciated. We have to be very transparent about their impacts to the business as well. Let them show that their contribution actually makes a difference. We also need to empower the teams and the team members, and that gives them a piece of, some of that satisfaction and ownership of the roles and the job that they're executing. And I think we have to continue to live the motto of driving candidates and driving diversity. When you create diversity, equity, or equality and inclusion programs in your organization, you have to live that. It is not it's not an initiative. It's a cultural shift and a cultural change. And you have to continue to feed that into the culture of the company and execute it on a daily basis. So not only do we say it, but we actually do it. And I think that will help your team members want to be part of that company and be part of something special.
Luis, can you share some insight on that?
Absolutely. In terms of retention, it proves to be a challenge. But I think that oftentimes where we misconstrue what really drives an individual to stick to a team or an organization, and we kind of set a price to it and say, oh, perhaps this person is interested in higher pay, right, or bonuses or other kind of fringe benefits. But I think that in my experience, I've been able to succeed in retaining candidates, particularly because I make sure that I'm talking to them. You make sure that you're mentoring folks, that you're growing folks, that you're providing them opportunities of responsibility, accountability, and ownership. They want to feel challenged. They want to feel as if they're contributing, much more so than anything else. Also want to feel that they're part of a collective team that's really driving to make a difference for the organization and the organization's customers. So I find that organizations that focus on mentorship, development, growth, and opportunities for education see a lot more success in the retention of employees as candidates.
Michelle, what can you add to that?
I absolutely agree. I think that it's critical that you take the time to understand each individual's motivations. What makes them excited about coming to work? What is important to them? And then you have to make sure that you provide them with the opportunities that meet those passions, that meet those requirements. Some may be driven by financial incentives. Others may be driven by having the ability to have time to do things like passion projects and work on something exciting and new that's outside of the day-to-day. But I think having challenges for each individual to meet what their goals are, being transparent and having open communication with them, and providing them with the opportunities to grow, to be successful, to have impact, I think is really important to ensuring that you retain those talented people.
I couldn't agree more. I wish there was so much more that we could talk through today. We've covered some really key areas around this, but we don't have full time to go deeper. But I have one more question that I'd like to pose to each of you. Since identifying talent continues to be a challenge, at the pace we're going, businesses will continue to be behind. What is it that you would tell another leader who's looking for advice to grow and diversify their cybersecurity team? Michelle, what are your thoughts?
It's going to be what happened for me. Take a chance on somebody. Take a chance on building the capability and the skill set in somebody who's excited and wants to learn it, but just doesn't have the background to do it. Look for those soft skills, look for those hidden talents, look for those things that you just can't teach, and be willing to take a chance and grow that individual. That to me is just one bit of advice that I will give everybody, because I could not be more lucky to be where I am today because of people who took a chance on me.
That's amazing. Luis?
I'll connect this to a little bit of my personal experience, and I think that I'll proceed that by saying that organizations should absolutely, definitely start taking a chance, just as Michelle said, with individuals, and also equip them with the resources, the mentorship, and the support to certainly move their careers forward. But I'm a graduate also of the Per Scholas, which is a nonprofit organization based in the Bronx. Many years ago, back in 1998, I was there. And today I sit on the board of Per Scholas. Per Scholas is now turned from an organization where back then I was building computers for schools that we were effectively donating and selling to schools, to now doing workforce development. So they're working with a huge talent base of individuals and minorities, particularly, that are really creating funnels and pipelines that are really going to benefit employers. So I think that connecting with organizations such as First Goal, such as the GCC, to really drive in that talent pipeline will be very super efficient for organizations to see a benefit from the diversity of talent that they're getting from these other organizations.
Lamont, what can you share with us on that?
So that's another great question. We are absolutely in a space of innovation with our teams as we continue to change our operating paradigm, moving from on-premise to cloud and hybrid infrastructures. So as you're building this diversification across your cybersecurity teams, I think the one thing you have to do is identify what are some of your focal points for diversity. What are your objectives? What are you really trying to accomplish? And how does that tie back to the business? Everything should be business driven. Identify your impact metrics. Metrics usually is a bad word when we talk about diversity, but I think there are impact metrics. Again, how do you affect the bottom line? How do you show that you created a competitive advantage, increase market share, increase a broader cultural view in the organization? And then be transparent with that plan and have capstones that are very simple around awareness. How have you discussed this within the organization? And how do you keep it in front of them? Around innovation, what things did you change for the better by creating diverse opportunities in the organization and living it as part of your culture? How have you trained the organization, and what components would you like the organization to grab as part of that training? Training can be very broad and very big. So you need to go back to your focal points and make sure that your training supports those focal points. And then the final one, I'd say, how do we drive culture? Those should be your capstones. How do I drive this into my culture to make it continuous, repeatable, and something that we do as part of executing our business?
Great insight, everyone. Thank you so much. We really have observed today that what we need are companies and leaders who dare to think differently and to be different. Our industry, just as many others, generally really benefits from tapping into talent with different backgrounds, experiences, intellects, the list goes on. Because it's in mixing all of those attributes together that you get the very best creativity and innovation, as we've discovered today. I just want to say thank you so much to our panelists for their thoughts today, sharing their ideas around leadership. And again, to our sponsors, and especially to our audience who's taken time out today to listen in. Thank you.
Thanks, panel. Great discussion, great insights. I hope that was as interesting for all of you as it was for me. Without losing any momentum, let's jump right into our first keynote. I'd like to welcome Masha Sidova. Masha is a great mind, great innovator in the cybersecurity industry, and a great thinker about some of the problems we all face as enterprises. Masha is the founder of a company called Elevate Security, which really focuses on the human behavior dimension of security in a way that really provides some nuanced benefits to organizations. It helps us think through and plan the kinds of things that are normal and good behaviors for organizations so we can amplify them, but it also helps us identify changes to or deviations from that so we can find risks in our organization that may come from our own internal practices, or in some cases, potentially from a bad actor who might have been able to compromise our network. So without any further ado and without stealing her thunder, Masha, I'll hand it right over to you. Masha, thanks so much for joining us and welcome.
Today, I want to talk to you about solving the largest unsolved problem in security, human risk. Did you know that if we take a look at the last 5 years worth of large cybersecurity incidents, 88% of all of the total losses were directly attributed to human risk. Now, what do I mean when I say human risk? Human risk is the collection of security decisions that your employees make on a regular basis that can either increase or decrease your attack surface. I'm Masha Sadova, the co-founder of Elevate Security, and over the last 5 years, I've had the opportunity of building the leading human risk management platform that helps organizations solve specifically this problem. Before that, I have spent the last decade of my career tackling this problem by bringing in behavioral science and psychology to help employees want to do security instead of just have to. And in this presentation, I'm really excited to be sharing with you some of the secrets and hard-earned lessons that I have learned throughout my career in hopes that these are things you might be able to apply in your organizations. Now, one of the things that I have seen in working with organizations for the last decade on this problem is the fact that we are in a no-win cycle that everyone hates being on, that does little to help us address this problem, even though this is exactly what it's trying to do. Now, what do I mean by that? We often send out our employees a one-size-fits-all training. Now, if I ask any of you in the audience if you've ever had to take one of these, and if you brute forced the quiz questions at the end, I bet most of you would raise your hand. I know I would. Now, by doing that, our employees are no more empowered to make their unintentional mistakes less often. Things like clicking on links, navigating to malicious websites, downloading malware on their machine, all while unintentional, still lead to incidents that our organizations are cleaning up. Now, what kind of impact does that have? It puts our poor, overworked security teams, particularly our SOC analysts, our incident responders, under a workload that is becoming more and more unbearable every day. And this fatigue and overwork doesn't have an end in sight, because fundamentally, when we take a look at trying to solve this, we buy more and more technology that only helps solve for the symptoms and not the root cause of this problem. We throw more money and more tech, and yet we are still on this no-win cycle where unintentional employee actions, human risk, if you will, lead us to cause these incidents and ultimately the cleanup that we are faced with on a daily basis. And this actually hasn't changed our situation in years. In fact, if we take the last Verizon data breach report that came out in last May, we see that 2/3 of all the breaches are directly tied back to human risk factors. So despite all of our efforts around training our employees and trying to clean up incidents, we are no further ahead in tackling these top line issues that are concern for many organizations year after year. And so it is no longer an option that we can take by leaving human risk unsolved for and a compliance checkbox if we expect our security teams and our incident response teams to be able to keep up in any meaningful way to the evolving and growing threat landscape ahead of us. So how do we actually tackle this problem? Well, you can't improve what you don't measure. And one of the things that I come across very frequently working with organizations is CISOs and security teams telling me, well, we do measure it. We measure by how many people have completed a security training. And while knowledge is important, it's not enough. What your employees know and what your employees do are two very different things. If we take driving as an example, the amount of people who pass their driving theoretical tests instead of their practice is probably a significant gap. And that's why we actually make sure we have both of these before giving somebody their driver's license. And the same goes for security and specifically around human risk. It's what your employees do in the wild, if you will, that matters the most. And there are actually a lot of things your employees are doing on a daily basis that you already are collecting logs about that can help paint this picture. So when your employee browses to a website that is blocked by your web security platform, great. That's intent data that shows that an employee may not be making thoughtful decisions or trying to download malware that has to be blocked. Incidents, it has been stopped because you have your security controls in place, and that's great. But your employee is still choosing to make those risky decisions. And all of those decisions start painting a picture that can be combined into a user reputation score. So if you take the security actions that your employees are taking, both good and bad, like do they use a password manager in MFA? Fantastic. Their score should go up. And you combine that with their access level to understand what the blast radius of their risky decisions are and how attacked they are. You're able to get together a really amazing picture that we've never before had in our organizations and our disposals that lets us understand risk at an individual level. And by taking this, we no longer have a one-size-fits-all approach for all of our employees who fundamentally have different risk levels and have different impact levels to our organization. So we can create profiles that track not just what an employee is good and bad at, but specifically what kind of business risks those actions might lead to, like ransomware, account takeover, loss of data, or privacy risk. And so we're able to start thinking through proactively, based on people's past decisions, what kind of risks we might be in for in the future. What's more is if you start mapping this against your HR data, you can start painting a picture across your department. Rolling this up into manager, department, and organizational level will actually give you a view of your org as a whole. And what you'll find is that there are going to be departments and regions and managers that are riskier than others and in certain areas. And what this information is empowering you to do is focus your time and attention and resources on tackling the problem in the areas that need it the most first, because resources are limited and not everyone is going to need the same type of interventions as others. One of the things that we're really excited to share this week is that we've published a cutting-edge research report alongside Scientia Research Institute that pulls together the 4.5 million data points we have across security decisions made by 114,000 employees. And what we've done is take a look at the common trends that exist out of these data sets and pulled this into this report, which you can download on our website. And the things that we've identified is that contractors are actually less likely across the board to click and compromise as compared to non-contractors. Managers, on the other hand, are more likely to click and compromise themselves than non-managers. And if we unpack that last graph in a little bit more detail, we take a look at where somebody sits in hierarchy of the organization to actually understand how likely they are to both click and compromise on phishing, but also download malware. And what we have found is that it's actually the squishy middle, as I call it. The managers, the middle managers, especially the frontline managers, your first-time managers are the ones that are likely to introduce the risk above all others. And what this can help you do is understand that maybe that is a population that might require a little bit more attention. And in the same way that we have new hire training, maybe you have new manager training, and how do you balance security along with your responsibility of management? Now that we've identified these risks and we have these pools of employees who might need more attention than others, the next question comes out, well, how do you actually mitigate this? Because knowing the problem is really just the first half. You actually need to tackle it. Now I want to ask the audience about a 3 strikes you're out rule. If you are not familiar with 3 strikes you're out, it's an organizational policy where if, as an employee, if you click on a phishing link 3 times, you're fired. So by quick show of hands, if you could type in with your, if you could use the emoji chat, could you raise your hand if your organization has a 3 strikes you're out rule or something quite similar? It looks like there's definitely a few of us who are participants in an organization like that. Now I got to tell you, this is a growing trend that I'm seeing, and it causes me a lot of concern because we have employees in our organizations who contribute in so many ways to our overline business. And we have incredible salespeople and incredible engineers who might just not get security. Does that mean we should fire them? In some cases, yes, but that shouldn't be the only resource we have, either more training or firing somebody to actually manage this risk that feels very, very black and white. So what I want to unpack with you is the a huge amount of areas and resources we actually have at our disposal to start mitigating this risk before we even move to something as intense as a 3 strikes you're out rule. Now, there are 3 components you need to actually manage and tackle human risk in your organization. First is visibility, and we've already talked about this, but you need to know if you're getting better or worse and how your departments are trending compared to each other. The second area is actually tailoring your security to the risk levels of employees depending on where they are. I think about this as bubble wrapping your risky employees, and how many layers of bubble wrap, it really is determined upon how risky that specific employee is right now. And that's a really great fix for managing the risk in your organization today. But we also need to tackle this problem in the long term because we really want to get to the root cause. And that's where the influence piece, that's actually tying back to the employee and addressing the root cause. I want to unpack both proactive security and the influence piece in a little more detail with you next. So when we take a look at tuning our security controls, in the past, maybe even in the present, we have to do this manually. It's very resource intensive. We're creating groups and permissioning with relatively broad brushstrokes because frankly, it's very time intensive. It takes a lot of effort, and often it's a blanket approach. And those controls tend to be far too restrictive to the majority of your organization and not restrictive enough. Most of the time we do it for the lowest common denominator. We take the riskiest population, the riskiest possible outcome, and we tune it for the rest of the organization, which makes for a really painful and business experience that is full of friction for the majority of your employees, making the security team not particularly popular within the organization. Now take a look at what is possible when you have risk defined by the individual. You're able to tune your security controls. Maybe it's browser settings, maybe it's email security solutions, maybe it's how much monitoring and access you give somebody. And that can be based on an individual level. So you give just enough controls around every individual as their risk changes both up and down. If we take a look at that in a little bit more detail, and we pull up Stephen that we looked at earlier, Stephen's not particularly good at malware specifically, but he's overall a risky employee. And so we should probably put him in a group of settings where his we're limiting his unknown software execution on his device. We're increasing how sensitive his email filtering is, and we're putting him in a group that has the most restrictive browser settings. So he's definitely an employee who probably shouldn't be visiting social media or any sites that aren't totally reputable. Now, if we take somebody on the other end, Josie, for example, in engineering, Josie's a rock star. She hasn't had any security mishaps in 2 years of any of our security logs. And so let her run free in the security environment or in the network and the data environment because she's proven it. So what does that actually look like? Maybe if she has a policy exception request or access request, we can auto approve that, saving our help desk time and intensive thought. We can maybe relax her browser restrictions and let her play Candy Crush if she wants. And what's more of a perk is that we can opt her out of some security training because she's already mastered the real world exam, which is navigating real attacks as they come at her. And so this becomes a totally different conversation with the business, and we're able to enable them to move much more freely than we have in the past. Now, to dive into the influence piece, I'm going to let you in on a secret that most behavioral scientists are aware. If you're going to change your behavior, you need 3 things to exist at the same time. You need the motivation to do it, the ability to do it, and a prompt, something that reminds you. And you need all 3 at the same time in order to do that specific behavior. In security, we have totally nailed the ability piece. We have spent a lot of time educating our employees around what is phishing, how not to click it, what is malware, how to be aware of it. And so ability and the knowledge piece of that, sure, it's there. But we don't spend any time motivating them, really telling them why they should care and how it relates to them. And we can take a lot of lessons around motivation from many other fields that already exist out there, including advertisement or your fitness tracker. So your fitness tracker is excellent at motivating you to run a few extra miles, walk a few extra steps. And let's see what that actually looks like in practice. In security, because we now know an individual's strengths and weaknesses, we can give tailored feedback specifically to where they're at. So we can give them a security strength score and show them how they're improving over time and what they need to do to move from tenuous to indestructible, as an example. We can compare their performance to their peer group, to their department, and when they're doing great, give badges, and if they're not doing great, below a threshold, we can give them course corrective actions. Now, what this does is it ties security to things that people already care about. Intrinsic motivation, like competition, like winning, like belonging, maybe not being last. And all of these things help us get to the same security outcomes we would have wanted to get anyway without using the stick approach. So we have seen this to be incredibly effective at communicating back to the employee and helping them come along the security journey with us. And so we talked about a lot of different components of this, and a lot of the things that I have learned throughout my career had the opportunity of pulling into the Elevate Security platform, which helps companies manage and influence their human risk. So you have the ability today to leverage a lot of the security tools and technologies you've already invested in to create a human risk score that gives you an understanding of where your employees are and where they're trending. You can use that information then to inform a lot of your security controls to create risk bubbles around your employees, and then you can provide really great and tailored feedback to your employees exactly where they are in their journey. If you'd like to know about the platform or anything else that we offer, please do have a chance to visit our website, elevatesecurity.com. And I leave you with one of my favorite quotes in this space. People are the weakest link in security is a comfortable excuse to lean on when it really should be a rallying cry to change the status quo. With that, thank you very much.
All right. Well, that was a really great discussion. Thanks so much. What wonderful insights. Really excited to be able to listen and to learn and take notes and think about ways to apply so much of that content to my own organization and my own challenges. I'm sure many of you felt the same. With that having been said, we're going to take a short break, give you a chance to catch up on your email, to sync with any of your teammates, or maybe just refresh some of the notes that you've been taking. Look forward to seeing you again soon.
Hello, NetMeasure attendees. My name is Ryan Brown, and I'm a board member of the Global Center for Cybersecurity. I wanted to take just a moment while I have you on break here and welcome you and share what's behind the name for NetMeasure. It is our hope that this is the inaugural run of what will be an annual event. And as we considered what to name this event, which is my job as a communication strategist and brand builder, two things really became essential factors for our consideration. The first, of course, was the greater mission of the GCC, to address and answer talent gaps in an industry that not only struggles to meet an acceptable standard of diversity, but also is growing faster than it can recruit. And even so, has these great disparities in talent and quality and practices between each organization, each service sector, and our relative geography. The GCC exists to augment and strengthen this decentralized model to ensure that we're all filling all the talent gaps. The second big naming factor is this moment right now, a literal life and death moment where the world is still gripped by a pandemic, where incredible digital transformation in just the past year has kept us afloat, but at the same time has presented us with new challenges for democracy and media literacy and privacy and security, all things cybersecurity. This moment and each and every year from now is an accounting of where we've been and where we're going. A chance to get out of the weeds and take a net measure of the industry and determine what are the most meaningful metrics that will determine our industry strength and direction. So I'd like to take a moment and thank you for attending. And while I have you on this break, point out that our superb conference partner, ADM, has built in the ability for us to get your input through polling. We want to hear what tomorrow's net measures bring. So take a moment and find your poll responder here somewhere on your right, and please let us know what you think. Again, thanks for attending.
All right, welcome back. Hopefully all of you had a chance to reflect on some of the things we talked about. I hope your notepads are as full of thoughts and observations and lessons as mine is already. Without wasting any more time, I want to hand it directly back over to our second keynote presentation and welcome Plinio Ayala. Plinio, thanks so much for taking a few moments to be with us here and to share your vision for the way that we can partner together as a community to improve access to cybersecurity career opportunities for bright minds from across the country and even around the world. Thanks also for all of your great work and experience doing that. Plinio is the CEO of an organization which is one of our core partners, an apprenticeship organization focused on technology training and cybersecurity called Perscolas. Plinio, thank you and welcome.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining me today. My name is Plinio Ayala, and I am fortunate to be President and CEO of Perscolas. I'd like to start our time together today by sharing a bit of my own story and then the story of Perscolas, this amazing organization that is quite literally reshaping how corporations are sourcing, hiring, and retaining diverse and qualified technology talent. I grew up in the South Bronx in the 70s and 80s, a time in the borough's history where the Bronx was literally burning. Entire pockets of my community have picked up and left. Buildings were abandoned, poverty pervasive. And yet in the middle of all that chaos, there was a sense of hope. Hope amongst me and many of my friends that somehow we'd figure out a way of living a better life. But we were often frustrated because we couldn't find a place to get help. You see, in my community, there was tremendous lack of opportunity. And for many of my friends, people who were incredibly smart, super talented, far too many of them ended up in jail or dying way too early. I remember growing up having to go with my mother to the Human Resources Administration building across the street every year to get recertified for food stamps and Medicaid. Those moments were perhaps the most dehumanizing, demeaning experiences of my life. And yet, in many ways, they were turning points because during those times, I affirmed to myself that I was not going to let the system dictate what I knew was possible for me and possible for others. You see, I strongly believe that the zip code where you were born should not define the trajectory of your future. So I got into this business of creating opportunity. Please allow me to introduce you to Joe Selpa. Before entering our program, he was a young father with no college education, working multiple jobs just to make ends meet. And in his words, starting to lose hope that he could build a better life for himself and his daughter. He found Perscolas, enrolled, and did extremely well, acquiring a number of certifications throughout the process. And immediately after graduation, started as an IT analyst for Deloitte. He has built a successful career over the years, and he's still at Deloitte, but today Joe is a lead cybersecurity engineer, living in Dallas with his daughter. And in Joe's words, being a Perscolas graduate means having the confidence and skills I needed to be successful in life. There are so many people out there like Joe, individuals who just need that one chance, that one opportunity. Make no mistake about it, Perscolas is in the business of changing lives. And we do it because we believe that it is the right thing to do, but we also do it because we know it makes good business sense. I want to examine some of the barriers ahead in this business of opportunity. First, looking at the opportunity index. Nationally, the United States scores horribly low. The wealth gap between the top 1% and the bottom 50% is increasing every year, and the odds for individuals in poverty, women, Black, and Latinx are dismal. As a result, families are relying on taxpayer dollars while unemployment is recovering and is now at about 5.4% overall. For Black workers, it is still at 9.6%, and for Latinx workers, 7.9%. And beyond that, there are now millions of Americans underemployed in the workforce, living paycheck to paycheck. We must look beyond public assistance programs to keep people afloat. We need to look at solutions that are right in front of us, proven tech training models that will address unemployment and income disparities that continue to exist in our country. There's also the challenge that employers have been facing for years, the skills gap. We're already seeing technology jobs rebounding post-pandemic. Thousands of these jobs, not requiring a degree, are going unfilled because we do not have enough skilled talent in this country available. And equally as critical are the profits businesses are missing out on as a result of not being able to find enough tech talent. If we don't mitigate the skills gap problem, it will slow economic growth and reduce innovation. So let me tell you about Perscolis and this business of opportunity that is building sustainable, diverse talent pipelines for growing businesses in need of technology talent. Perscolis is a technology training nonprofit that over the last 26 years has provided tuition-free training, career development, and placement support for over 13,000 Americans across the United States. We have learned and pivoted as a result of the pandemic and went from an in-person training initiative to now implementing in-person and remote training models in 17 cities across the country. Our model is employer-led, meaning that we put our employers at the center of every decision we make. The training tracks we design, the talent we source, the skills we provide are all heavily informed by our hiring partners, who will eventually go on to take advantage of the talent we produce. And this approach works. Take a look at our results. Year after year, 85% of learners enrolled graduate, and 80% of our graduates find employment in tech in less than a year. Even more impressive is that our placement wages continue to be strong, and in 2020, we are demonstrating average wages of $21 an hour, 4 times more than what our learners were earning prior to entering our training program. But self-reporting is not enough. Our model has been evaluated many times, and in fact, we are the only IT training nonprofit in the country to have successfully completed 2 random control trials, the gold standard of evaluations. Each of these evaluations has determined that our graduates do better in every category. They acquire jobs at higher rates, they earn more money, and they retain their jobs longer than their counterparts. And the most recent evaluation even calculated Perscolis' return on investment. And it's significant, an 800% social return. I share these numbers as an important way to contextualize Perscolis' impact and also our possibilities for growth in today's economy. As a nation, we have made a series of questionable decisions and investments that pump money towards expensive higher education that the majority of our country cannot afford and will only add a burden of tens of thousands of dollars of debt to their already difficult financial situations. We are sold the American dream from a young age and told that the only way to get there is to pursue a 4-year expensive degree. But not everyone can or needs to go to college. Perscolis is a proven alternative, a model that is driven by employer demand, focusing on hands-on applied learning, and is now experiencing sustainable corporate investment. For 26 years, we have consistently shown just how valuable this business of opportunity really is. So what's next? Why are we here today? Well, over the course of our 26-year history, we have trained more than 13,000 individuals, and while that's impressive, what is more impressive is that 2017 was the first year we trained over 1,000 individuals in 1 year. And then in 2019, we trained more than 2,000, effectively doubling our productivity in 2 years. We took a pause in our growth during the first year of the pandemic, remaining steady with our graduation rate, but taking a giant step in learning how to train remotely. And now with in-classroom and remote training models in place, we see an opportunity to exponentially grow this organization's impact. And over the next 4 years, we have a growth plan in place to train over 10,000 learners annually in 30 markets by 2025. We're also building a self-sustaining organization that is pushing past the limits of traditional philanthropy and government-funded programs. Instead, we are moving towards becoming a social enterprise that offers the market an in-demand product, diverse, highly qualified, and skilled technology talent. Corporate investments are redefining our ability to be self-sustaining and reimagining the scale that's possible. In the last 3 years, we've taken a new approach to self-sufficiency and built a sustainable revenue stream that is customizing training and creating hiring relationships with corporations who are paying per scholas for every person we train. We expect that this new revenue model will continue to grow, helping to fuel our scale plan. In closing, I want to invite you to be part of the solution, a solution for the tech hiring crisis that this nation continues to face, and to help break the historical racial underrepresentation that currently exists in the tech sector. We can't continue to wait for four-year colleges and even two-year associate's degree programs to slowly fill this ever-growing tech pipeline, while piling debt on young people's shoulders year after year. There are proven alternatives right in front of you if you are creative and willing to be bold. And isn't that why we're all gathered here at this conference, to explore new, creative, and innovative solutions? And actually, by working with Per Scholas, the payoff can be felt immediately by employers. Our training solutions teaches both the technical and professional skills needed to ensure long-term employment. And our students tend to last 30 to 50% longer than their counterparts on their jobs. So join us and make a plan to work with Per Scholas to hire our tech talent. Reach out to us now at perscholas.org to learn more. We're looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
So great to hear from partners and leaders in the industry who have invested so much of their own time and effort in their organizations in being able to help enterprises and not-for-profits like the Global Center for Cybersecurity be able to really serve its members and helping grow the cyber workforce and in a way that's inclusive and that allows us to create teams that look more and more like the communities where we live and operate as enterprises. Without any further ado, though, I'd like to take us right into the final element of our agenda. We have a great panel, which I'm really excited to introduce to you. Thanks to the generosity of 2020 partners, we've been able to gather a really esteemed panel of security leaders from around the world with expertise that's really unparalleled in the industry. This panel will be moderated by Tony Spinelli, a partner of the Global Center for Cybersecurity and somebody who's also dedicated his life to the causes that we're describing here. The theme of this panel is Globe as Enterprise, which you heard me reference at the beginning. Certainly no opportunity for us to do this well and do this successfully as a community if we don't engage all of the partners from around the world and across both governments and private institutions. I'm just really excited for you to have a chance to be able to hear from and listen to some of the perspectives of some of these esteemed former government leaders that we have here on our panel. Without any further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Tony. Take it away.
Hey, thanks so much, Josh, and thank you all for attending the GCC Net Measure event. We're so excited about the mission and vision of the Global Center for Cyber, and we're so glad you're with us for this event. I've got an unbelievable, literally unbelievable panel of some great cyber minds together from across the globe, and they're going to share some insights with us on cyber and the topic of government-private partnership and how that can affect cybersecurity outcomes. Why don't I go ahead and give a brief bio for each one of our great panelists, and then we'll jump right into it. So first, Phil Riley. Phil, thanks for joining us. Phil is a former CIA officer and ran Special Activities Division for the CIA. He was the senior U.S. intelligence representative to the United Kingdom during the 2012 London Olympics. Pretty spectacular stuff. He actively advises U.S. and foreign companies in cybersecurity arena. Thanks, Phil, for joining us. Steve Hill. Steve's currently the head of operational resilience and threat integration at Credit Suisse and a senior visiting fellow at King's College of London. Steve previously served over 30 years in the British government, including the National Security Secretariat, countering transnational threats such as terrorism and proliferation. Thanks for joining us, Steve. Patty McGinnis. Patty was Deputy National Security Advisory covering security intelligence, and resilience with 2 successive British prime ministers. His lead on what American audience would call Homeland Security, including cybersecurity and crisis response. He now addresses threats and manages resilience in support of listed companies. So thanks, Patty, for joining us. Also joined by Chris Inglis. Chris is former Deputy Director of the National Security Agency, currently serving as the Looker Distinguished Visiting Professor of Cyber Studies at the United States Naval Academy, and a commissioner on the U.S. Cyberspace Solarium Commission, charged with mapping out U.S. national cyber strategy. Chris is also a managing director at Paladin Capital Group, a director of the boards for FedEx and Huntington Bank, and a member of U.S. Defense Science Board. So thanks for joining us, Chris. And lastly, joined by the Honorable James Clapper. He served as the 4th U.S. Director of National Intelligence from August 9, 2010 through January 20, 2017. In this position, Mr. Clapper led the United States intelligence community and served as the principal intelligence advisor to President Barack Obama. Thanks for joining us, General. It's great to have you, and great to have such a distinguished panel for the topic at hand around government-private sector partnerships. So let's just jump right in. And again, thank you all for joining us. I can't wait to get the feedback from our panelists on these topics. So first, do you feel it's fair to say that to counter cyber threats requires both government and private sector enterprises to work in partnership? Explore this a little deeper. We've been talking about this for years. How can we work on this to really make a lasting improvement?
So I'll open on that. I think I'd start with 3 points, and in each of these points, there's a little bit of good news, a little bit of sobering news, a little bit of bad news. First, there's a growing awareness on part of both the government and the private sector, particularly in Western democracies, that the problem of cyberspace, the challenges, the aggressors, the things that go boom in the night are getting worse, and at a scope and scale that is worrisome. And we see increasingly, while 85% of what's taking place in that space is attributable to criminals, increasingly the nation states that occupy about 14% of the number of events are having a disproportionate impact. That's the bad news of that first point. The good news that then comes out of that is they increasingly see that they have common cause and that they're going to have to figure out how they collaborate, how they integrate their efforts to address that. That leads to the second point, which is in considering that integration or collaboration, the private and the public sector clearly recognize that their tools are different. Sometimes even their time scale is different. What they focus on is their priorities. But having said that, the diversity of those tools covers the waterfront. And if you put those together in the right way, you might just get a united front that's considerably more capable than either side could muster alone. Within the United Kingdom, there's something called the National Cybersecurity Center. If you come out of Victoria Station, look straight ahead at a gleaming new building, you're probably looking at that center. And if you were to walk in, you would see shoulder to shoulder folks from the private sector and the public sector, the UK's version of my parent agency, the National Security Agency, so GCHQ, and private sector representatives, shoulder to shoulder, co-discovering, co-mitigating threats on the fly. Now, while that might sound like a drop in the bucket, how could they possibly get their arms around everything that's happening in that space? It's remarkable what that effect is off that floor. The relationships that are established on that floor can then enrich the stovepipes that are off that floor, and having a propensity to collaborate at the kind of the discovery of some of these things that then extends back into the rest of their operations to have at least a possible bias for collaboration. We're currently in the United States studying that strategy and some others. The United States Cyberspace Solarium Commission is trying to recommend, and we've lit on this possibility, hopefully a probability, that if we have meaningful integration, private-public collaboration, will make a profound difference in the outcomes that adversaries heretofore have achieved with impunity. That then leads me to the third point, which is we need to set expectations. Both sides are going to have a role. Frankly, individuals, sectors, private and public, governments, plural, all have a role. And we need to put those together in a way that are complementary. Two, the government's not going to be able to solve all the problems of the private sector. So as a board member at FedEx, we well appreciate we operate in some interesting places. Some might say risky places, but that's where the business is. We have to make investments required to have a sufficient resilience and robustness that we can have confidence that those are well-placed kind of business imperatives. But if at some point we come up against a nation state that holds us at risk, we have an expectation we're going to have a partner in government, or governments plural. That then kind of begets that in this space, we're not going to defend our patches alone, simply those things that we own. We're going to try to figure out how to lock arms and make it such that if you're an adversary in this space, you've got to beat all of us to beat one of us. Now, that's a pithy, possibly Pollyannish phrase, but if we can strive to move in that direction, I think we'll be in a much better place.
Those are really interesting perspectives and very thoughtful insights. General Clapper, what's your view on that?
Well, we're working better. This is a journey that doesn't have an end really, because there's always room for improvement. Having seen this from both sides, both the government and the non-government domains, you have to remember simple observation that the government doesn't control the internet. So there has to be a partnership. Having said that, there are certain inhibitions in both camps, both government and non-government, that prevent full and open and complete transparency. And they are understandable and appropriate. From the standpoint of the government, it's always the issue of protecting sources, methods, and tradecraft. And from the standpoint of industry, it's oftentimes a proprietary or liability issue that's at play. So I think people have to understand those constraints that are legitimate on both sides and attempt to work through them. I think as we've seen recent attacks, SolarWinds comes to mind, I think that will probably do more to impel cooperation and collaboration between the government and the non-government sector than anything else, when we understand the magnitude of the threat that's posed both ways and both camps. The Congress has tried to legislate this. I was involved in an effort or watched an effort on the part of the Senate Intelligence Committee some years ago, and that fell flat in the Congress. So I think the greatest catalyst, the greatest motivation is a realization of the common threat faced by both government and non-government entities. And for that matter, if I might, this applies as well to our foreign partners, since cyber, as you well know, doesn't recognize nation-state borders. So this is a problem or an issue for, I'll call it the coalition of the willing. So that's another dimension of sharing.
That's really insightful. Patty, Steve, what do you guys think? Do you agree?
So I think the way that Chris has laid that out is a wonderful aspiration. I was involved at the outset in the establishment of the National Cybersecurity Center, working for Prime Minister Cameron at the time. And it's a great step forward. It's 5 years since we did that. And I think we have to ask ourselves, have we got 5 years of improvement? And I think we probably haven't. So I do think it's a moment to think about what are the issues that make it difficult for government and industry to collaborate. Now, where it is relatively straightforward is when you have an attack by a nation state, and it clearly is an attack, an intrusion, a presence by a nation state. And we're having this panel discussion in the shadow of the United States-led response to the SolarWinds intrusion and exploitation of software on which many of us rely. And that response and that leadership is really welcome. So nation states, that's relatively straightforward. I think the difficulty is that, of course, the majority of intrusions and exploitation of networks is being done by criminals for financial gain. And government, certainly in the United Kingdom, is determined that its investment in core cybersecurity for the heart of the national security state shouldn't become the nation's IT help desk. And it isn't only in Europe that there's concern. one of the reasons why business, including critical national infrastructure, is vulnerable is because there's an underinvestment or there isn't sufficient focus upon the requirements of security, whether that be national security against nation states or it simply be the corrosive effect of criminality. And of course, the two often operate in partnership. And I think we've seen a really interesting thing happen over recent years, and there's an acceleration at the moment, certainly in the European Union, which of course regards itself as a regulatory superpower, whatever you think of that as a phrase. And that is that government is defining clearly what it is going to do and what it's not going to do. And the way in which it's defining what it's not going to do is by regulation. And regulation has a really interesting effect on collaboration because usually the institutions that interact with business for government are in some way involved in the regulation, whether they be the National Cybersecurity Centre, which provides the advice behind regulation, or it be individual bits of the British or individual European states, or indeed the European Union, that have an interaction with business. They usually have some regulatory role, and that rather flavors the interaction. They begin to tell. I think the thing that Solarium Commission did so wonderfully is it captured the idea of what business should be doing for itself in a patriotic way, and the way in which it should aspire to have much better and potentially machine speed situational awareness of what is going on critical networks in business, but for business purposes, not just for government. Steve will have a close perspective on this coming out of the finance sector, which of course is one of the most heavily regulated, both by those concerned with financial stability and those concerned by network systems.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. I agree with everything that Chris and Paddy have said, but I'd maybe even go a little bit further, which is whilst there is a confluence of interest at one level, there are also some quite interesting misalignments. So whereas government will typically, I think, take a sort of systemic longer term view, as soon as you go into the private sector, you see not quite the tyranny of the shareholder and the customer, but that's the priority. And those two things won't always exactly line up. So if I take the example of paying ransoms after a ransomware attack, it's very clear from a government perspective that this is not helpful. It fuels an ecosystem of criminals, encourages them, actually funds them to find more exploits. This is a bad thing. But if you're sitting in a company where it's a bank or perhaps kind of more vividly a hospital, suddenly the equation may look a little bit different because both ethically and legally, maybe, and in terms of protecting your shareholder value, perhaps paying the ransom is actually the right thing to do. And I think that's an interesting conflict there that I'm not sure that we've managed to work out what the right way forward is. I also wonder whether there is a sense that the government agencies sometimes maybe don't strike quite the right balance between offense and defense. It's great to be developing lots of new zero-day exploits which you can use in a hybrid warfare situation. But there are downsides to that, and we've seen with something like Eternal Blue what happens when they get out into the wild. And so I think from a government perspective, that equilibrium between offense and defense is a particularly interesting one. And there are some things that if you're sitting in a private enterprise, you can't do. We see most of these criminal gangs, which are the ones that we worry about, operating from jurisdictions that we can't reach. And only governments can have that influence there. And I guess there's a question for whether enough is being done there. And we've seen recently new sanctions, but we've been doing that for the last 5-10 years, and it hasn't really changed the balance of advantage. The current equilibrium, the public-private collaboration partnership, I'm not sure whether we're winning as fast as we need to. And as we move faster and faster towards this digital economy that the last year has accelerated even more, we still seem to be playing catch up. And that can't be where we are. Phil, I mean, what is that your sense, Phil, or Paddy?
So before Phil comes in, can I just pick up on two things that Steve has said? And the first one is, I'm afraid to say when I'm with businesses in the middle of a cyber crisis, in particular a ransomware crisis, and they sometimes naively turn to me and say, oh, we really must go to law enforcement, or we must go to the National Cybersecurity Centre and they will help us. I have to tell them that unfortunately Ronald Reagan is right, that in many situations the most frightening sentence is, I'm from the government, I'm here to help you. And I'm afraid to say that if you lay out all of the government agencies and figures, including legislators and political leaders in office, and look what they will do for a shareholder value company when it is subject to a non-state or something that isn't proven to be a state cyber intrusion, the answer is very little that really helps the company in the short to medium term. Law enforcement doesn't, I'm afraid. I'm afraid to say national cyber centers don't. I'm afraid to say legislators tend to be blamestorming and looking for whom to blame. And they can have profoundly corrosive effect upon the workforce, which of course is the thing you most need to respond when you're subjected to a major network system event. And then Steve brought out this tension between offense and defense. And I've recently been in the British press making the argument that I'm afraid to say we've just had an integrated review in the UK of our security and defense policy. And I'm afraid to say it doesn't explain how we're going to make ourselves sufficiently strong at home to be able to truly use the offensive tools that the program, which I oversaw some years ago, introduces. And I think that's going to be a constant strain when we think about offense and being able to campaign in this new domain. And Chris has done some great work both on the theory and the practice of this. We've got to be able to defend at home, and that's about actually your workforce and the way they think about it and the way they think about what their responsibility is, knowing that, as I do, and I think other people on the panel do, the government isn't a cavalry that's going to come in and help them. They're going to have to look after their own networks and fight their own corner, and they've got to have that mindset. Sorry, Phil, I interrupted you very rudely.
If I could just build on that for 2 quick points. I know we need to get on to some other speakers as well, but I think to Patty's point, when the government is called on these events, say a ransomware has just taken place, part of the reason why the government is powerless to do something is you have to actually go back 2 months or 3 months or 6 months in order to stop it at its incipient phase. We need to actually move left of the event and try to find ways to stop it. What the government can be doing is not showing up and magically restoring the information, but removing the conditions that give safe harbor to these criminal elements, and in some cases nation states, right, who happen to front as criminal elements, remove those conditions such that we have an enduring effect on the probability that this is going to happen again.
Yeah, if I could chime in on the idea of the public-private partnership. I think a lot of work needs to be done. I think we've heard some examples of that in the last few minutes. But one of the examples I think of where there's a positive sign is FS ISAC, right, dealing with the financial institutions of the United States. Some would say that's a partial success. In 2016, there was an offshoot organization called the FSARC, the Financial Systemic Analysis and Resilience Center, created by the 8 largest U.S. banks. And they are designed to protect the financial institutions and infrastructure of the United States. Now, cyber is not the only threat, obviously, to the financial institutions, but it is the principal threat. And this particular platform is very unique in that FBI, Homeland Security, Treasury, and other government agencies are embedded with it and working with it closely. I've never seen that type of interaction in a public-private partnership. Now, I think this has been a huge success because only 3 months ago, the FS part of the ARC went away. Now it's just the Analysis and Resilience Center because the U.S. power sector has joined their financial sector colleagues in this organization. So I think that's an example for other sectors of the U.S. economy to work together much more closely with the U.S. government. The other area I just want to bring up is in terms of public-private partnership, and I think is a real issue area, is I seem to think some of the best cyber experts come out of the U.S. government, and that's not to insult people in the audience who may not have a government background, but I think to intimately know the offensive and defensive capabilities of the most sophisticated enemies is critical. The problem with that is you agree with me, and I'm talking to the audience now, because you're recruiting these people in numbers that the U.S. government is hemorrhaging, and we cannot replace them. So we need to improve upon not only retention, but have an ability for people to move in and out of the government much more readily. Now, that's not a novel idea. We've been doing that, and the government's trying to do that for many years, but not with great success. There's a lot of reasons. There's security reasons, and they're not invalid ones. There's huge salary disincentives, but the public-private partnership has to work together to make that going back and forth much, much easier, because neither the public or the private sector has the bench strength to do what we need to do in the cyber area alone.
Yeah, Phil, those are really great points, and I can tell you guys, as being an operator, a CISO for over 20 years, mostly in banking and finance, you really had to, build your organizations as if you were going to be alone. So it's almost like if you could have invested greater time up front with getting closer to key government allies where you're doing business, so that flow of not only information but capability was there in the time of need. That's important because when it comes to the nation state threat, every corporation's at a massive disadvantage. And, Chris, I know you've got some deep insights there, but that nation threat has always been one for, much of our audience as well as myself. How do we deal with it and how do we handle it going forward?
Yeah, so let me just build on the conversation that's taken place so far, which is the good news, bad news is that people and doctrine are integral parts of what you might describe as cyberspace. People and doctrine, meaning roles and responsibilities, are integrally connected to how that technology performs. And I will tell you, my experience to take advantage of frailty in that space is that more often than not, to a high degree, they're taking advantage of weaknesses in people and weaknesses in doctrine. Are the roles and responsibilities set right? Classically, in a lot of organizations, the people authorized to take risk, extending digital infrastructure into odd places, aren't the people who have to then mitigate that risk. And so there's a tail chase being played. So if you get those latter two parts right, that's the good news. You get those latter two parts right, it makes a substantial difference even before you begin to invest in the technology. In terms of the third wave of cyber attacks, first wave might be an attack on data and systems. The second wave might be on the critical functions dependent on that. We're now experiencing a third wave, which is an attack on confidence that we have that digital infrastructure will serve our purposes. I've heard that characterized as wetware attacks. Can they isolate individuals? Can they convince an individual something's true, or some bias might be perhaps the kind of standard line of thinking that they might not otherwise have thought? Do that at scale and you have influence ops. Nation states are engaged in all of those activities, and to the degree that they've done that with impunity, they're only doing more of it. If you think about the security kind of statement of a Russia, they know they can't win head-to-head contest. They're certainly not going to try to effect a military competition, but they might try a competition using all the instruments of power at their disposal. And they realize that in that asymmetric contest, that cyberspace gives them a unique advantage, not least of which is you can do a lot of things in cyberspace without tripping a head-to-head conflict, without tripping something that might garner them the undivided attention of a Western competitor. So they believe that peacetime, if there is such a thing, is the decisive phase, and they have used that to their stunning advantage. As we'd indicated earlier, you're not going to completely remove mischief from the field. Cost of entry is too low. The ability to attribute in time to do something about that, as if you're smacking the hand of a child sticking it into a candy jar, those things make it difficult. But you can affect the decision calculus of those adversaries. You can make it clear that we're a harder target. You're going to have to spend more to succeed. You can make it clear that we're going to be paying attention to who's doing what, and we will align action. And then finally, coalitions, that's a stunning advantage that the West has. We tend to have allies, others have partners. Coalitions can make a meaningful difference in defining the norms or the expectations of behaviors, such that, again, an adversary needs to face the prospect they need to beat all of us to beat one of us. There are so many tools that lack a connection to some larger strategy that I think that without spending another nickel, we could make a significant difference. Not being Pollyannish, it won't be perfect. There'll still be a lot of tension and chaos in that space, but I think we can go a long way.
General Clapper, what's your view on that?
Well, that's a great question. And I think there's a question about whether a private entity should have to worry about taking on a nation state. That's that's an issue that's worth a deeper discussion than I'm capable of. But and I think the difference here is the government has, as a part of its deterrent, offensive tools and capabilities that private companies don't or shouldn't have. And I think it's long been the view of the government that private entities shouldn't be in the attack mode, principally for the unintended consequences that could occur if they did, which is one of the reasons why even the government is pretty cautious about using offensive capabilities. So companies, in my view, need to focus on resilience. Make the assumption you're going to get attacked, and what do you do to recover, and what can you do to practice for that? And I think resilience is a key word. What can you do ahead of time, assuming you will be attacked in some way, or your data will be purloined or worse, manipulated. And so that places a premium on defenses, the latest patches, although that doesn't necessarily work either. But I think the most important thing is exercising and showing people, what vulnerabilities there are and how those are exploited, whether by nation state adversaries or individuals, criminals, hackers, whatever.
If we shift a little bit and we start thinking about what about corporate leaders, what about board members and their roles around governance? Steve, what do you think they should be doing there?
Yeah, let's get very practical about this. I think there are three things that I would be telling any board member that they need to do. The first of which is that they really need to insist on better executive support. Sometimes the support that they're getting doesn't seem to be straightforward, pragmatic, in the way that I think they should be expected to receive. And I think that independence of advice in the real world is something that sometimes that can be lacking. It's no good saying you should be doing A, B, C, and D. Board members are faced with prioritization decisions, which are really tough. And that's what they've got to focus on making. And they need to be served with good information to do that. Point number two is that we have to be really modest about that information. I think most of us have served dealing with counterterrorism and issues where we're very comfortable living in a world of imperfect knowledge and having to make decisions on the basis of dynamic, imperfect, and sometimes getting those decisions wrong. But that is the world that we now live in. And I think what I've seen, particularly I think in the financial sector, is that sometimes the sort of sense, and you've seen it with governments with COVID, that you can simply follow the science and that data analytics will give us all the answers. I think that has to be balanced with a kind of solid sense of judgment and common sense, which is born of experience and really cannot simply be taken to one side on the basis that the science, which can be very selective, tells you to do a certain thing. So I think for me, having boards that are comfortable making risk-based decisions and acknowledging that they will never be able to make those decisions on the basis of perfect knowledge, I think that's the second thing. And then thirdly, I think the financial sector is at the front. And I say it with some deference to Paddy here, because when he was in government, this was his word. But resilience, the ability to bounce back, the assumption that preventative measures will not work, I think is becoming much more central to the ways that risk is now being dealt with and threats are being addressed, which is to say a sort of scenario way of thinking that really worst case scenarios can happen. So there's a global shift at the moment in terms of trying to improve everybody's operational resilience. And it's taking probability out of the equation. It's saying, assume the really bad stuff. The really bad stuff is going to happen. And let's take it from that point onwards and work out how we're going to respond. And to me, the two very practical things which I see of having most value, added value for boards, is first of all, running cyber simulations, post-incident simulations, not technical simulations, going through the technical response, but thinking about the reputational damage, thinking about insurance, thinking about interactions with law enforcement, with regulators, and so on. And that really, I think, brings home the reality to board members if it's done right. And then secondly, I think bringing in external advisors that have a very different view of the world can be really eye-opening, because in all of our worlds we can become a little bit insular. And if you're thinking about the worst cases, bringing in someone with a very different set of experiences, I think can show you a whole different and perhaps even scarier set of worst cases. But the flip side is it can also show you the good things. And I think that what I also see happening now is that as boards look at future opportunities, bringing in outside kind of individuals who are not sort of subject to the same groupthink can be really advantageous. So I think those are the three things, I think, in practical terms, that boards are now thinking about and hopefully doing.
Well, I mean, Steve, I think you've caught something really important there. I reflect that boards are interested in this subject matter because cyber data technology issues are a hard to price risk. Yeah, that's true in the insurance market, which is why the insurance coverage is so uneven. And it's hard for boards. And what they want to do, executive leaderships and boards in particular, and audit and risk committees, is they want to get it into the position where they can manage the risk. So they want it to look a bit like in a financial institution, the way in which they deal with fraud. There is fraud, they have to manage it down, they have to have controls, but they kind of can price it. And the problem with cyber is they cannot price it. So there's a dangerous tendency then, which is to constantly try and get it under control. And Steve has said something really important, which is the role of uncertainty. And the uncertainty around and technology issues needs to be described and understood, and the limits of what can be known. And we all know that. I mean, having sat at the head of the Situation Room table in the UK, the Cobra table, and dealt with WannaCry, dealt with NotPetya, and had that experience where you're not sure what is happening, and maybe you don't know with WannaCry for 10 days exactly what is going on, and yet you have to manage through your health service being interfered with. Getting used to those levels of uncertainty is vital, but also a lot of business leaders think because they compare themselves, they have heart-to-heart chats with colleagues, they have maybe external intelligence organizations to talk to them, maybe they talk to people in Homeland Security or the National Cybersecurity Center, and they feel therefore that they have good situational awareness, and they don't. My experience in my private sector practice is that on the whole, when there is an intrusion, when something goes wrong, businesses only go public if they absolutely have to, if there's regulatory pressure to do so, or if it becomes public and they have to get ahead of the story. And in my experience in the last 18 months, and I looked at this recently, about that's about half to 60% of occasions, which means 40% of the time it isn't becoming public. And if it does become public, they're not explaining what really happened to them. So having a false sense of certainty about, the way you understand the world and you can get this into a box is one of the problems, and Steve has pointed that out. But also there's the point that Chris was making, which is we need a conceptual frame for this, and we need to be ambitious. Now this event has a particular focus on the workforce. When I work with private equity funds looking at cyber businesses they might invest in, if the cyber business model of the model of the business we're looking at is that they are going to have many more skilled people as they grow the business, then I advise against investing in it, because there isn't a constant flow, a point that Phil was making, of these highly skilled people. So if your business plan is that you're going to have more skilled people to do, and you're going to have more network systems and more skilled people, it's not going to work. Which means you've got to be asking the question, how can we get out of doing a lot of the work that we currently have staff doing? How do we automate? So they've got to have a conception. But there are a couple of things. I want to just draw out one thing I think that Chris said in particular. There are a couple of things they've got to have in mind. So one of them is that at the moment, all of the drivers, if you're in business, many of the drivers, if you're in business, are to protect yourself from criminals who are attacking you for financial gain. And they tend to attack IT. Having myself sponsored an offensive cyber program in the United Kingdom, we were really interested in OT, how we could have quasi-kinetic effect. Yes, we wanted to do the other stuff too. Yes, we wanted to manage the sensibility and understanding of our opponent, but we wanted to interfere with whether some fundamental service vital to his military effort would work, which meant we were interested in OT. The majority of cybersecurity spend at the moment is on IT, not on OT, and that's because there isn't a strong criminal driver around the OT target. It's not as strong as it is on IT, and that's a problem. That's also a problem when you look at the way in which we're expanding our attack surface. So I've been really interested in the UK, been doing some work on electronic vehicles. We're going electric in the UK, in the coming years, and we're going to have a big electric vehicle charging network. Okay, and that is being pushed out, and that's been conceptualized and pushed out. There is very little security built into that because there isn't someone. It's Chris's point, absolutely. There isn't someone saying, "Hey, we're expanding our attack surface. Best we expand our defense. Best we automate it, and not think we're going to expand our defense by having a whole load more skilled people to backfill for the task." So I think it's quite a complex area for business leaders to get their head around, and they need it laid out for them in a broader way.
If I could build on these comments on the board, I think that those are all quite valuable comments. Now, there are two further things that I would add. One is that often in a boardroom, the lexicon is simply wrong, right? We talk about IT as if it's this special, unique kind of thing in the corner with no understanding about what its role in the business is. We've probably all been in a boardroom when somebody walks in from the information technology department and says something of the form, I need $10 million to do two-factor authentication to prevent cross-site scripting. And so the technologists need to understand that the purpose of IT is to aid and abet, sustain, extend the business. It's a business discipline. It's not just technology for its own sake. Therefore, when you ask the information technology or the operational technology crowd, what are you doing? If they tell you I'm defending IT almost for its own sake, that's the wrong answer. You have an alignment problem right up front. And so make sure that the discussion starts with, I understand what our business plan is. I understand what the role of technology is in extending and meeting those business objectives. Here's how I think we can do that. Here's what the return on that investment might be. And oh, by the way, we're going to take some risks along the way, and I need your help buying those risks down. But you start and finish with the business proposition. The second flaw that's often in these conversations is that we don't have the right expectation about what the art of the possible is. You often have folks saying, we need a secure system, as if that's possible. It's not. Right? I break your heart, but you can never have a secure system, not least of which a system that has people or doctrine involved in it. But the undulating landscape of technology alone makes that an impossibility. If you have a defensible architecture that I then need to defend, you have two benefits. One, you now have a reasonable goal that you can meaningfully attain. And two, you understand that there's a human component of the actual defense, which kind of employs agility, audacity, maneuver, those things that we're so used to in the rest of our business environment about how you take risk, how you then calculate those risks, and how you roll with the punches. Not that you want to suffer some of these pratfalls, but you will. And if you take the advice of running some exercises, you'll learn some things in the theoretical realm of kind of walking through these risks that you can then go back and buy down through your investment. But a well-defended system only builds on a defensible architecture, not a secure architecture, because the bias in thinking you have a secure architecture is you stand back and watch it do its miracles. It never will.
Well, great. Well, let's take another tack on this. One of the things I think we all agree on is the differentiator in cyber is not the product, what your location is, but the thing that really matters is talent. And talent seems to be the challenge that we hear from every executive leader in cyber, in the business, and in the government that can help us. Yet we have so many challenges around this, especially with diversity. And nothing probably is more important as we think about this than diverse thought around risk. And cyber is one of the biggest ones. So as we contemplate talent, diversity, being able to raise more risk and see things from multiple different angles and vectors, what do you think we can do, especially from the government perspective, to incubate more opportunity to drive improved cyber talent outcomes, and especially in the diversity space?
Statistically, we're short of cyber expertise. I mean, by a wide margin. And this is an issue both for the government and outside the government. One of the things I became a proponent for the last couple of years I was DNI was the intelligence community needs to foster mobility. By that I mean if we bring young people on in the government and they do 4 or 5 years, and we ought to encourage them to go to industry to refresh, update their own technology, and then come back to the government. And instead of making it hard for people to do that, the intelligence community should be making it easy. And because I believe that many of these people, young people, will come back to the government simply for the opportunity to serve and out of patriotism. And the institution needs to make it easy and facilitate that flow back and forth, because I mean, we're all, we're not talent rich here. And by the way, this education process needs to start way early. I'm talking middle school, high school. Worrying about it at the college level is kind of late.
Well, thanks, panelists. Just unbelievable insights on a challenging topic around government and private sector partnerships. And, certainly love the talent angle. It really speaks to what we're doing at the GCC around workforce development and improving cybersecurity outcomes. I want to thank each of you individually, Phil, Steve, Patty, Chris, and General Clapper. Thanks so much for your insights. I can tell you for a fact this audience, I'm certain, has learned something from one of the insights you shared with us today. So with that, let's move on to the next step. And Josh, back to you. Thanks so much.
All right. What really incredible insights. Thanks so much, Tony. Thanks again to 2020 Partners and all of the esteemed participants that they were able to bring here for your benefit and for all of our benefit as we have a chance to just listen and learn from some of their experiences. And as we conclude the conference, maybe just a few words here about us. So I hope you've enjoyed what you've heard today. I hope you found the agenda and the content compelling. If so, if you like what you heard, if you like what you saw, please don't miss a chance to get to know us. You're welcome to engage with us on our website. You'll find access to that in this platform. Please engage with our partners. You just had a chance to hear from 2020 Partners. You'll find a booth in our partner exhibit hall where they'll have a chance to connect, and you'll be able to learn their story. You'll also be able to engage with any of our other partners that you heard from today and many of our other sponsors as well. Please take the opportunity to join a conversation with some of your peers in our conversation lounge, or schedule some time with some of the media in attendance and take the opportunity to be able to tell your story and amplify some of the things that you and your organizations are doing around DE&I, around cybersecurity, and those causes that we all care so much about. And ultimately, if you, like I said before, if you like what you heard and you want to be a part of it, please schedule some time with one of our board members or with me. Happy to talk to you about what it takes to become a member or how you can engage with us. And with that, thanks to everyone who participated. Thanks to our members, to our partners, and our sponsors. A special thanks to our design partner, ADM Productions, for making all of this possible even during this pandemic and giving us this rich virtual experience where we're able to share and collaborate with all of you and with all of these partners from around the world. Thanks to everyone for your time, and thanks for your attendance today. We look forward to staying in touch.